Wake that ass up.
Early in the morning.
The Breakfast Club.
Morning, everybody. It's DJ Envy, Charlamagne the Guy. We are the Breakfast Club. We got our co-host with us, Jason Lee.
That's right.
Of course, from Hollywood Unlocked and a host of other things. And we got a special guest joining us this morning. He has a new book, The Solution Focused Diamond. Elliot Connie.
What's up?
Welcome.
What's
Thank
up,
you.
Elliot?
Morning.
Tell them who you are, man. Tell them who you are, what you do.
My name's Elliot Connie. I am a psychotherapist. I host a podcast. I do lots of things hoping to inspire people to be better versions of themselves.
Now,
right.
I just got a couple of questions to start before we get into the book. So where did you start and why did you want to be a therapist?
Oh, man. You start off with the deep question.
That ain't too deep.
It's pretty deep for me. I had a real tough childhood, man. And I grew up anxious and depressed and suicidal and struggling.
From where? Where'd you grow up from?
Massachusetts.
Okay.
Grew up in Massachusetts. And it was hard, man. And I didn't know how I was going to pull myself out of it. And I realized that hope is this like really powerful thing. And I felt like if I could figure out how to get myself out of that situation, I wanted to help other people get out of that situation. And I learned very quickly that when your pain has a purpose, it doesn't hurt. It's a source of inspiration. And the only thing I could think to do with it was be a psychotherapist because you professionally help people.
What planted that seed in your head at such a young age to know that that's what you wanted to do?
God, man, I don't know. I can't tell you. I really think God touched my life, to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
So when you decided to go for school, you said a tough childhood. What was tough about your childhood?
Man, my father was a very aggressive man, and took out his aggression on his kids too often. You know,
Was he military?
No, he's just aggressive. And to be kind to him. I mean, he was a black man from a difficult place. Grew up in Chicago, and I don't think he had the skills to raise a family in a loving, caring way. I think he wanted his kids to be successful so bad. And I think he wanted his kids to achieve so bad that when he saw anything that made us look like we were getting off, he only knew how to like beat us back into the middle.
That's all he knew, I'm sure.
Yeah.
He sounded like one of those parents, like a lot of our parents were that were raising us out of fear.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he was raising us out of fear. I think he was raising us out of panic. I mean, to be honest with you, I think he had some stuff going on too. But I don't think he had the skills to do what, loving, caring parents would do.
Mm-hmm.
And as a consequence, that's not how he raised us.
Do you think that's what made you move to wanting to be in the mental health field? Because you were like, there's something wrong here, and I want to figure it out.
No, you know what? I think it was the opposite. I think it was there's something right here. I want to figure it out. Like, because after going through all of that, I found myself in college, and I'm like, how come some people go through this stuff and end up on drugs and doing crazy things? And how did I land in college? And I wanted to share that. I wanted to, life, none of us have any choice on the life we get. Like, life just comes how it comes to who. And I just wanted to, you can do things with your life. Doesn't really matter what the origin story of it is. Like, you can drastically, instantly, profoundly impact the outcome. But I think too many of us are held back by the origin. And I just got on fire about wanting people to know that. And because it wasn't what was wrong, it was what was right. I just figured, how did I end up here? And I don't think I'm special. And if I'm not special, I just need to tell people the secret. I just need to let people know what the secret is.
And it just happened organically. It wasn't a conversation you had with nobody or something you read.
So all of what you went through, it was curiosity that led you to the purpose?
Yes, curiosity. It was curiosity. I mean, I remember sitting in class, and I went to a school in Texas, and I'm looking around, and all these white affluent kids were around me. And I'm from the exact opposite. And, we go back to our dorm room. They be like, my mom sent me $100 in frozen lasagna. And I'm like, my mom said hi on the phone today, And how did I end up in the same situation as them, given everything I'd been through? And there's something about that. I mean, there's something about learning your origin story was your gift, regardless of what it was, and being able to turn that around and impact your outcome. I think that's freedom. I think that's true freedom. Realize you're free from your origin story and you can do whatever you want with your outcome.
When did you start having those conversations, if you even did, with your dad?
No, man. So my dad, we had a violent interaction. We had violent interactions throughout my life. And when I was 19 was the last one. And I called him and I said, man, look, I can't have this anymore. I need you to follow 3 rules. If you can follow these 3 rules, I can get past everything else.
So you called your dad.
I called
the same 19. One that raised you that you just said was aggressive and said, Dad, You need to follow these 3 rules.
3 rules.
Oh boy, I know this didn't end right.
It was the hardest conversation I've had in my life, to be honest with you. Like, I don't know if anybody's ever been in that situation, but like for 19 years, I didn't defend myself. You just take the beating, like, you know. And I called him and I said, I got three rules, man. You can't yell at me, you can't hit me, and you can't curse at me. If you can do those 3 things, I'll figure out the rest. And he said, F you, and he hung up the phone. I was like, all right, bet. You broke one of the rules. No, well, we've spoken a couple of times. Like, he was at my younger brother's graduation. He and my younger brother are very close. He was at my younger brother's graduation. I interacted with him, and he's tried to call me here or there. But no meaningful conversation.
Well, I feel like in the black community, a lot of us are taught you never speak back to your parents or never. You set boundaries with him. Do you think that's appropriate for people to do? First of all, because I think we're told you respect your parents no matter what. They can say whatever they want. They can do whatever they want. But yeah. I think I don't agree with that. Yeah,
well, I 100% was raised that way. Like, you respect your parents, doesn't matter what you do. But I was in such a bad place. I was like, I'm pretty sure that I'm not supposed to die behind that rule. Like, I'm pretty sure I'm not supposed to suicide out of here just because I'm not supposed to talk back to my father. So I got to a place where it was like, I got to set this boundary or else. And it profoundly changed my life. Because then you realize, like, y'all have value. You know, like, we have value as human beings. And I can be in your life and I can break certain rules, like, you know, don't walk in my house without your shoes on and stuff like that. But you can't abuse me. Like, I don't care what your bloodline is, what your relation is to me. Like, I'm a valuable human being deserving of safety. And forget respect for a minute, but I deserve safety, emotional, physical safety. And the proudest thing in my life is I gave myself safety. I gave myself emotional and physical safety.
In a lot of ways, that respect thy father and thy mother thing, if it's coming from a place of abuse, that's kind of like slave master slave relationship, right? When they tell you turn the other cheek and respect your master, like.
Yeah, I mean, the idea that we have to respect people who are abusing us, whether it's slave, police, some authoritative boss, like, that's not true. Like, we don't have to respect people who abuse us. We can eliminate them out of our lives. Like, that's a thing. That's a real thing. That's the hardest thing I ever did. And to be honest with you, I have prayed daily for my father to call me since then. It's been 20 years, 20 plus years.
You still sending that prayer up?
100%.
But if
I love this man. I want him to call me, but you still got to follow them 3 rules.
But a person can still live in your heart, not be in your life. So once you exit the relationship, there's still something today that makes you want to have that relationship.
I love him. He's my father. I have so much forgiveness for this man, but he won't let me give it to him because he won't follow these 3 rules.
If that wasn't your dad, would you feel that way?
Yeah, I would hope so. I would hope I feel that way towards anybody. Like, I just want to be a source of love and peace in this world, and I want people to know that you can change this world with love and peace. I think we've convinced ourselves it takes anger and abuse.
I wonder
and violence.
I wonder if it's the term rules for an adult. You know what I mean? Because as an adult, you set the rules. So now when your child, because no matter how old you are, he still looks at you, I'm sure, as his child, grown man or not, is the setting of rules. But I would also ask, besides the abuse, I kind of look at some of the youth today, and I feel like a lot of the problems in this world is because I feel like a lot of these kids don't respect their parents. They don't respect authority. They don't respect, my parents never abused me, but I respected them.
Right.
And I was one of those kids that I never talked back until, even if I thought I was right and they were wrong.
Right.
Because I always looked at it like my dad, and the reason I said military earlier is because my dad was ex-military, ex-police officer, so he always seen things from a different eye and a different angle. So I always trusted him to say, my dad does not want me to go down this lane because he loves me. And I took it on the chin, not physically, but just, what I mean.
Yeah.
So that's why I ask. And that was never the case when you look at some of the things?
No, I don't think so. And I think that's an interesting point. Like, if I said something other than rules, but I think to your point.
But adults have rules.
But if you look at your child, you wouldn't take any word, boundary, rule, request. It wouldn't really matter. Like, I was raised in that 1980s, 1990s, where black child is to be seen and not heard, and all that stuff. I don't think it would have mattered. But I also agree with you. I think part of the issue in today's world is not respecting authority. I'm talking about not respecting abusers. I'm talking about not allowing abusers to have free reign to your life. I do think we have to learn to respect authority. I think there's a lot of reasons contributing to why kids don't do that.
You told me the other day that you feel like kids should disrespect their parents.
I think parents should expect.
In the context of our
wow.
in the context of our conversation. Go ahead, Elliot.
Let me, Jason. Let me put that in context. How many of you guys in this room would like to raise your children to be strong-minded, independent-thinking, ambitious kids or adults, right? Mm-hmm. Well, if you are going to instill that, part of that is confidence, part of that is voice, part of that is knowing I have value. And when you're teaching your child that, and I'm talking 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, the first place they practice voice is on you guys.
Correct.
That's the first place. So you might say to them something, and I'm going to tell you something. My mother, I love my mother. Hopefully my mother will listen, and out in Chicago, I love her. And when I was a kid, my mother, I had 2 brothers. My mother would say, Ellie, go do the dishes. And I would be like, why didn't you ask one of them? And that would get me popped. You know, that would get you looked at.
That's usually pop, and I told you so.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
But if you're teaching your child to be confident, to be strong, to value their voice, they should ask those kinds of questions, and it allows you to parent them. But we shouldn't translate that as disrespect. They're just practicing.
That's not disrespect.
They're practicing their voice.
But that was in our era.
Right.
In the 1900s,
that was disrespect to me.
I would never think to talk back. I would never even think to talk to my parents the way my kids talk to me. But it's like, it's as Ellie said, it's not disrespect. It's just them being like asking valid questions.
But that's also the way white people raise their kids, doing that.
Yeah.
Because like my grandmother, you could never, she'd tell you whatever to do. Paint the house. Just go paint it. You may not know how to paint, but you gonna paint the house.
But
we confuse we confuse respect for silence, and I think that's a problem. I think we have to allow our children.
Expound on that.
If I say go paint the house, and the child says yes ma'am and goes paint, we think, oh, that's such a respectful child. But that same child, if some strong-willed 17-year-old kid in high school says, let's go skip school, they're going to say, yes, sir. Like, we have to teach them to question, why am I painting the house? I should understand the context of the life that I live in. Why am I painting the house? For these reasons. Okay, now it makes sense to me, and I understand, and I can do things that I understand and push back on things I don't.
That's why white folks got kids on leashes in the malls, because it's stuff like that.
Yeah, I don't
run free, you know.
Yeah, I don't agree with you with that, Elliot, because and this is gonna sound crazy.
All right, here we go.
I got 6 kids. So if I tell one of my kids to do something, I expect it to be done. I'm not going to do it with something that's going to be detrimental to their health, something that's going to hurt them. It's part of what everybody needs to do to be in this household.
I agree with you.
Meaning if dad's chores or dad's way is to make the money, pay the bills, do this, that, and the other, and I ask you to shovel the snow, don't ask me why. Don't say, well, why didn't you ask this sibling? Why didn't you ask this one? No, because I asked you to do it.
But you could explain it to them just the way you explained it just now.
Envy, listen, you
shouldn't have to. Because now your question, because when you say, hey, Dad, I want to play basketball and cleats cost $500, I don't say, well, they're cheaper cleats. I'm like, oh, your grades are good. Okay, I got you those cleats.
But you should have that conversation on both ends of the spectrum, though. Now, I agree with you. If I say to my child, go do this, you want them to go and do it.
Now, I ain't gonna say paint the house. Like paint the house a little far.
But why that's a really good example is to a child, they have thought without wisdom. So you might ask the child to mow the lawn, but in their child brain, you ask me to paint the house. It's not, you have to help me understand the world in which I live. And I think it's both ends of the spectrum. If the child says, I want to play basketball and I need $600 Jordans, I don't think it's enough to just say, oh, you got good grades. You want to sit them down and explain to them, like, this $600 is hard to earn.
That's right.
And you're worth it. And then that child thinks they have value, and that child understands the world in which they live. But remember, guys, like, they get confidence, they get thought, they get spontaneity before they get wisdom. My mother used to give me chores all the time, constantly give me chores. And I now know it's to keep me busy, because she didn't want me out doing silly things.
Right.
I didn't know that at the time. I was like, why is she picking on me? I look out the window, all my friends playing. Why is she picking on me? Well, now I'm an educated, ambitious, successful business person, and some of those friends that were running the streets are not even here no more. So my mother, she had to just do those things, and I didn't have the wisdom to see it. So when you ask the kids to do things, you ask for something reasonable, like do the dishes, but they heard, go paint the house.
But is this a rule that applies to everything? Because it's one thing if a kid says, hey, I want to try some fentanyl. Well, no, don't do fentanyl. Let me explain to you why. So you invite them to a conversation about it versus I expect these things to be done as your parent, so go do them.
Yes, I
And
think
because when you start inviting a kid into, I mean, I don't have kids clearly yet, but when you have this perceived negotiation of what you expect as a parent, that you invite them into a different type of relationship.
For sure. And not all things are negotiations. I just think we need to have more conversations. If my child said, I want to try fentanyl, it is perfectly okay to say no, and let me sit you down and we're going to converse as to why. Like, conversation is powerful. Look at what you guys have done with conversation. Everybody in this room has changed the world with conversation.
And I see the difference because I have conversations with my kids now, right?
Right.
I'm from the era of because I told you so. My wife changed that for me because she has conversations. She explains why, and I see a different child in all my kids than how I was. So I do agree with you, but sometimes I want to be like, stop asking me some damn questions. Just go pick up your shit.
I'll tell you why that's dangerous. The first time the first breakthrough I ever had in therapy that like had me in tears was when I realized my dad would discipline me for things he never taught me.
Facts. Yes.
You know what I'm saying? Like
Yes.
things he never explained to me. He just expected me to know. And the example I always use is one time I'm following him in the car, right? I just got my
remember this one,
license.
yeah.
I'm following him in the car. He runs the stop sign, so I run the stop sign. He pulls over, I pull over. He gets out the car, walks to the driver's side window and smacks the shit out of me.
Yeah.
And tells me to wake up. And I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, I'm following you. You told me to follow you. I just learned my life. I just
bet
got my
you never
license.
ran a stop sign a day in your life again.
I'm sure I did, but that's not the point. The point is, how about you're the one who told me to follow you? I'm doing what you did. Can't you see why that deserves an explanation and not a smack in the face?
But that's exactly the point, though. Is I'm from a generation where the smack in the face was the teacher, and I'm saying, your conversation should be the educator. All of you are incredible conversationalists. You do it every single day with Earth. We need to do that with our children. Conversation needs to be the educator. But I remember the smack was the education. Because to that point, like, if you run a stop sign, I smack you every time, you're going to stop running the stop sign.
You know what I mean?
But I'm not a dog.
Right.
Like, you can actually teach me things through words and language, and it'll amend not only my behavior, but how I view myself.
You shouldn't hit dogs out there. Anybody listening there, you shouldn't hit dogs either.
No, but we discipline animals without conversation.
Right.
Yeah.
And you can change my life. It's not important, like, for real, like, it's not important that you just change what I do. You have to change what your child sees when they look in a mirror and they see themselves, or you're not doing a good job as a parent. So if all I see is I'm just like a tool that's being like behavioralized away, that's not how we become effective, successful adults. That's why we take any job and any salary, and certain people, certain cultures, they go into a job and like, I want this salary. Why? Because they've been raised to value themselves.
Right.
They've been raised to value who they are. They have a level of self-worth. So you just can't pay them anything, right? And we need to raise our kids to say, you are worth my conversation. The greatest gift you have is your ability to converse. So you're worth my time. You're worth my conversation. The only thing that you guys have, that all of us have, that we cannot get back is our time and our attention. So give your time and attention to your children, and the best way to do that is through conversation.
And with that point, so I've ended my relationship with my father a few years ago. It very intentionally, I told him it's over. When you say you still, because I want to go back to you saying that you still want or desire to have that relationship, people always try to guilt me into like, that's your dad. You need your dad, he gonna die soon. You got to have that relationship. I feel like people should have the permission to leave a relationship forever if they choose to, and still be at peace. Because do you feel like people have guilted you into believing that you need to have closure? Because you can have closure without having the relationship, right?
Yeah, Jason, it's a funny thing you say. So the situation I was in and am in with my father, you talk about people trying to guilt you. I went and got a whole master's degree in family therapy. And my teachers would talk to me about, they talk to the whole class, what's your relationship like your dad? And then I'd say my situation, oh, you need to call him. You don't know. Like, people telling me that I need to subject myself to abuse aren't listening. So when I tell you now, like, I pray every day, and it's true. I pray every day for a healing to happen and for me to have a relationship with this man. Because that's my dad, and I love him to this day, and I feel like I have this gift of forgiveness that I'd like to give him that he is not willing to accept. Because he's got to do these things in order to accept it. However, do I have peace? Of course I do. Because I've given myself this thing, and anybody can come into my life as long as you give me emotional and physical safety because I can sort out everything else.
Maybe I don't understand because I don't have the type of relationship you guys have with your dad. But I kind of feel like what you said, right? Because Charlamagne and I always talk about it. Like our parents they didn't know, right? There was no instruction manual. They did the best that they could at that time, especially during that time, especially, the grandparents and great grandparents into slavery. So, my dad was growing up when, he couldn't use a certain bathroom because he was black. So I get it. But you never feel that way. Like I at least want to try to menace and have a conversation before my dad dies. Like
when my mother died, right before my mother died, literally in the hospital, she said, I did the best that I could. And she was a bad mom. I mean, when she got sick and all that with drugs and all that. And I felt giving her peace by accepting that as her apology and saying, I accept your apology. It's good. I forgave her. And then she passed away. Yeah, I understood in that moment when she said, I did the best that I could, was you basically did the best that you could with the limitations of health and drugs and all that. So I get that. But at some point, there also has to be accountability. And I feel like we're taught, no matter what your parents do, they can bring you in this world, take you out, do what I say, do as I do. Like, at some point, you have to be accountable. If you're going to have a clear mental mind for the rest of your life, I don't know.
It's also about the realization. I have had the realization. I could tell y'all a story that I won't tell. It's my father's story, and I'll keep it. But if I told you the story, his treatment of me makes more sense. If you knew this thing happened to him in his life, and the treatment of me and his children and his wife and so on make more sense. But it's not really important that I have the realization. It's important that you have it. Yeah. Because I can't be like, oh, now that I realize this, I'm better at taking punches. That doesn't make any sense. I forgive him, but if you're going to continue to punch me, I no longer care about the origin of why you're doing that.
Right. That's real.
So you have to have the realization. And until you do, I got to keep you at a place where I'm super safe.
That's important too, though. I remember when my dad told me in 2018, after he heard me talk about my struggles with anxiety and depression, and he read my second book, and he heard me vocally talking about mental health. That's when he told me that, he was going to therapy 2 and 3 times a week for 30 plus years, and he's been on 10 to 12 different medications, and he tried to kill himself like 30 plus years ago. So when he told me all of these things, I was like, oh, now I understand why you were the way you were. You were just projecting that pain and that hurt onto us.
That's
right.
You
know what I mean?
My mother, during a real tough time in my life, I was late in college, undergrad, and my mother pulled me aside and said, I got to tell you something about your father. It's going to be hard to hear. And she told me something, and it wrecked me. Like, it was a significant family altering thing. And all of a sudden, my father's behavior, I understand why he was scared. I understand why he had abandonment issues. I understood all of it. I still don't want to be punched.
That's right.
I got you.
I'm with you, 100%.
I want to ask you a question about, and maybe I don't know the numbers, it's just what it seems like. To me, it seems like a lot of these kids now, teenagers, go through a lot more than we did. True. Whether it's drug use, suicide, not being able to project their feelings. What do you think the cause of that is? Because sometimes I feel like, although, it might not be as healthy, our parents being as threatening, was that keeping us in line, or was it one of the things we never dealt with it and we're dealing with it now that we're older?
Well, so there's a multiplicity of things that lead to this thing. And I agree with you. I think kids are going through a lot more now than we ever had to deal with. But if I could sum it up in one word or idea, it's access. And I'll tell you a funny story what I mean when I say access. But I remember some kids when I was in high school, we used to, like, I grew up in Boston, Massachusetts, so we used to like walk everywhere, and we would cut through this big field to get to school and get to baseball practice and all that. And some kids on the way to school cut through this big field, and they found a bag of money, drugs, and a gun in this bag. And they got to school, and it just went everywhere. You hear what so-and-so found? They found this money bag and guns. And by the time I got to baseball practice, like, I wanted to see this. I'm 15 years old. I wanted to see this. And they told me it's at so-and-so's house. After practice, go to their house, and it's gone. Like, the parents had found out about it, turned in the police, so on and so on. In this world, I can just text those people. And, like, I have access to these things. And if you think about something like drug use, like, I remember my therapy practice. I've been doing therapy long enough that I remember when the world wasn't so text-oriented and social media and direct messages. And then one day, this kid literally in my lobby is texting his friends, meet me in my house, I want marijuana. That's new. Like we would think all the stupid stuff y'all would almost curse.
Yeah,
Think all the stupid stuff y'all would have done
Mhm.
if you could instantly text.
Word.
The stupid. I remember this girl I had a crush on. Me and my boys snuck out of the house. We went to her window and threw rocks. Wake up. She didn't wake up. So nothing. We could have texted her in today's world. We could text her.
No, for
Access
real.
is different. And remember, we have access before we have wisdom. We have confidence before we have wisdom. We have thought and spontaneity before we have wisdom. So now these kids just text all day and DM and Snapchat, and it gets them into more trouble than we had any availability. to
Yeah,
get
because
into.
it's those like those temporary moments you're putting online for the world to see forever.
Yeah. And they just don't think about it. And I did all kinds of crazy stuff when I was in college. I'm sitting here right now, man, and I love my life.
What
Got
school
all
did
these
you go to?
books. Texas Wesleyan University.
Okay.
And I got all these books. They're going to be happy I said that, by the way. But I got all these books and this master's degree and this career. I did shit in college that this would not have happened if there were video of me doing
That's
it.
facts.
This would not have happened if it was a Facebook. And y'all know you can't just delete all that stuff. Like there was a baseball, an all-star game the other couple of years ago, but this pitcher was called in to close the all-star game. He walked onto the mound and he pitched and he went back in the dugout and all of his teammates were like, "Man, look at your phone." And they had found some racist thing he had tweeted when he was in high school. I didn't do that because I didn't have Twitter. I mean, this dude may have been full on racist or just a stupid 15-year-old. Because I can tell you, I was a stupid 15-year-old.
I think we all were.
We all were.
But we didn't have Twitter.
Right.
We didn't have Facebook. We didn't have Instagram. So there's no documentation of my stupid. And I don't have as easy access to other stupid 15-year-olds. And I think that's the biggest issue right now is access. Kids have immediate access to everything. I was talking to one of my employees is 27, and he thinks, I'm 46. He thinks I'm 96 because the world was so different when he was growing up. And we talk all the time about how, like, I remember I got in a fight with my older brother when I was a kid. I love the cartoon to this day. How the Grinch Stole Christmas is my favorite Christmas cartoon. But when I was a kid, that came on once a year, and if you missed it, it was gone. So I'm like, I want to watch it, and my brother wouldn't let me watch it. We got into this fight. A 27-year-old now doesn't understand that. Like, what do you mean? What do you mean you just missed it? Just go to Hulu, Netflix, YouTube.
TV used to cut off.
Amazon
used to cut
Prime.
off?
So that access is so different now, and it causes them to live in a completely different world.
You know what I want you to talk about? You've created something called the solution focused universe.
Solution. It's a solution.
I'm sorry.
You said-
Solution
I thought that was a new word for a second.
Solution focused universe. And you talk about solution focused brief therapy. Can you break that down? What is that?
Yeah, man. Solution focused brief therapy. It's a type of therapy that I could best describe as outcome driven, as opposed to problem driven. I think we associate most therapies with solving problems. Like I got this problem, depression, anxiety, alcoholism, whatever, and I go to a psychotherapist because I want to solve that problem. And that never resonated with me when I was in graduate school. And what solution focused brief therapy is more like, regardless of the problem, what are you trying to evolve into? What are you trying to grow into? And who are you trying to become? And let's figure out ways to create that. Because when you create that, that's inherently going to solve or adjust your experience with the problem. And it's a very specific way of doing therapy. And it was the only thing that resonated with me when I was in graduate school. And I just got on fire about it. It was kind of like a small thing that people were doing in a corner of the world at the time. But now it's taken off quite a bit, and I've contributed significantly to that. But it's just a really cool way. It's in line with who I want to be as a person. Like I want to be, in order to solve your problem, I have to talk to you about your problem. And the difficulty with that is if I talk to you about your problems, you feel worse. And problems in a lot of ways are irrelevant because we all have them. And there's nothing you can do to have a problem-free life. So I think what we should be doing is figuring out a way to overcome those problems and become the version of ourselves that we want to be.
But how do we do that in a world where everybody's afraid of being canceled and everybody that's canceling people act like they don't have problems?
That's right.
You know what I mean? Like you talk about Twitter or whatever 10 years ago, I've said the craziest things when I found Twitter, but now you'll be held accountable for it. So how do you help people like resonate in a world where their cancel culture is a real fear that they may have?
You know, so Jason is funny. So I started my career as a psychotherapist. I'm now working on TV projects and all these other things. And almost every entertainer I talk to talks to me about cancel culture. And it's hard for me to explain, but cancel culture in a lot of ways is irrelevant. Because like Jason, for example, is a dope dude. mess with you. I like Jason. So if you are your authentic self, cancel culture doesn't really exist unless you break, like, not just for being out there, but you could break some significant rules that all of us will say we're not okay with that as a world. And I think I'm okay with that, actually. But like, if you're just being your authentic self, there are some people that'll say, I can't do that. But there's some people that are going to connect with it. And you just have to be yourself so the people you connect with vibe with you. Like, and I'm going to tell you something embarrassing about me as it relates to cancel culture. Like, as a black man, when I entered into the professional field of psychotherapy, I say I used to put on the uniform. So I started writing books and I get invited to these conferences. I'd never done this before. So I'd call one of my white colleagues, like, hey man, what are you going to wear? Because I want to wear a hoodie everywhere I go. And what are you going to wear? He's like, I mean, I'm going to wear a polo shirt, brown slacks. So I'd put on the uniform because I wanted to be accepted, right? It's embarrassing to admit now, but I wasn't really as interested in being authentic as much as I wanted to be accepted by my colleagues and peers who did not look like me. And after a while, I realized two very important things. Number one, they're never going to accept me. Doesn't matter what I wear. Number two, I realized it's causing me harm not to be my authentic self. So I started going to these conferences in a hoodie. I was just at a conference the other day in a hoodie in front of hundreds of people doing my thing in a hoodie. And there are some people that are like, we are canceling Elliot. We don't want to mess with Elliot.
Because you got a hoodie on?
Yes.
Jesus Christ.
Yes. But so many people were like, this dude's authentic and he represents hip hop. He represents where we come from. He dresses like us. And now my audience is 100 times bigger. And I think we shouldn't focus on cancel culture. We should focus on authenticity. And people are going to resonate with you. And the ones who don't, forget them. Now, I would say, I mean, there's certain actions you shouldn't take, certain crimes you shouldn't commit, certain words you shouldn't say that I think as a society we all say, let's all agree on these things. But if all you're doing is just being wild on Twitter, there are certain people like, man, I love Jason's wildness. I love his craziness. Jason's saying what I wish I could say. Jason's as confident as I want to be. And you represent something powerful and special. Like, Jason, your story coming from where you came from, I don't know if anybody's read his book, but his story coming from where he came from, like, you just being alive, using your voice, there are people watching that. And your representation is inspiring them not to become owners of their own media platform, but to wake up tomorrow. And to me, I'm willing to risk being canceled. That's cool. I want a young black kid to say I could become a psychotherapist and dress the way I was raised to dress. I don't have to start wearing a tie and polo clothes. I can be this, and you're doing that.
But how do we get the world on therapy? Because, like, the fact that Whoopi said gypped and that was a thing, or the fact that pronouncing is like, and I'm gay, and everybody out there is gonna be mad. You know, the pronouncing thing is, for some people, is getting a little reckless. I could say that, and people may not attack me the same way if he says it. They may feel a certain way because, you know, straight people shouldn't talk about. I don't know.
I say it all the time.
Yeah,
they is bugging.
They is.
And by they, I mean one person.
You know, but like, how do we get the world to understand, like, we come into this experience called life from whatever we've gone through or whatever we see, whatever lenses we see the world, whatever experience we have. And this is what we believe or think without being canceled or being, you know, attacked. I mean, I don't know. I feel like the world right now needs therapy.
You invite therapists up to the Breakfast Club. But I mean, seriously, this is what I said earlier when we were talking about parenting, is conversation is powerful. And invite people into the conversation with all of your massive platform. And that's exactly what you do. That's how we change the world.
Well, Charlamagne got me in therapy by judging me. Every time he's telling me, like,
I just could see
you need therapy.
Yeah, I could just see, like, Jason had a lot of, like, pain.
Yeah,
that he might have been projecting on the people at a certain point. I'm like, Jason, and same you. Whenever I've talked to Jason cool as shit. I know Jason for how long now? I don't know.
A long time.
14, 15 years, something like that. Like, he's always been cool to me. So when I hear people say things about Jason, I'm like, nah, that ain't really Jason. So it was at Tiffany's birthday party a couple years ago. We just had a conversation like, just try therapy, Jason. And I read his book. I'm like, try therapy. You got a lot of trauma you haven't dealt with.
But that's the answer. Like, a generation ago, the Charlamagne would not have said that to the Jason. They said, man, let's go out drinking so you can relax.
We did that too, but
yeah.
but now that's love. Like, that was Charlamagne loving you. Like, hey man, I can see you dealing with some things. I read your book. You should try this. And we just make that a part of the conversation. Like I was telling anybody who would listen to me how excited I was. Like, I do interviews all the time. I'm past the age of starstruckness and all that. Like, I'm just excited to be up here because I watched you talk about Black mental health before I saw anybody else do it. So that's how you invited into the conversation. 4 Black men are up here having a conversation right now about mental health.
Yeah.
I didn't see that when I was young, and there are young people listening to this, and they're thinking, "Ooh, I can get on the Breakfast Club without being a rapper. I can get a master's degree and get my way up to the Breakfast," because that's what we thought before. And they're now thinking, if one of my friends is struggling because of the way Charlamagne talked to Jason, if I see a friend struggling, I can suggest therapy instead of drugs and alcohol. Like, that's how you change the world, is through conversation.
Yeah, I ain't gonna lie. When you suggested therapy, that was a different level of being personal with somebody. You know, just to say to somebody, "Hey, have you thought about therapy?" And I don't think we have those conversations as much. And I will say there are people that may not be wearing it maybe the way I wore it, or the way I may have carried my stuff, but that need it. Like, people need therapy. I just think even if you don't think you need therapy, go talk to somebody to see if you need the help to have conversations you're having.
Most people need therapy. And to your point, Jason, like, you don't carry it the way most people do because most people don't put it in a book.
That's what it was.
Like,
I read the book, yeah.
I read his book. The first thing, he's like, this is the first time I saw a man murdered.
Yeah.
That's how the book opens.
And you got shot. Like, all types, you know what I mean? Like, it's a lot.
I was going to ask, do you think everybody needs therapy?
No, I don't think everybody needs therapy, but I will say, Jason, if I can use you as an example, Jason having a trauma and appearing as if he's had a trauma prove the health, his mental health. For example, if you have a physical illness in your body and you sneeze and cough, that is evidence that your body is healthy because it's responding to the germs within it. It would be weird if Jason got shot, observed a murder, and all the other things that have happened, if he's just running through life. I'm an accountant working in my cubicle. Like, that'd be weird. So the fact that Jason was doing things evidence of his trauma, it triggers him to say, man, you need to go deal with that. And I think a lot of people have dealt with things, and we think that it's weakness, but it's actually evidence of your mental health, that you went through something and you're emotionally sneezing. Like, you went through something, you're emotionally coughing. And we need to be able to have the conversation and say, here's how we deal with emotional sneezes and emotional coughs.
Does everything that we deal with, do we have to deal with, though? And meaning not have to deal with as in speaking to somebody, but, you know, let's say, you know, Jason, you know, seen somebody get shot and he dealt with it his own way. He was able to think about it, talk about it. He's never going to forget it. It doesn't traumatize him, but he goes through it in his own way. Does he necessarily have to speak with somebody?
That's a great question.
So I'm going to answer that question in 2 parts. When I say deal with, I don't mean talk about that issue. Like, one of the beautiful things about solution-focused brief therapy is I wouldn't require Jason, all right, therapists use these words that to me, they're trigger words. Like, let's unpack that. Like, no, I don't want to unpack that. I don't want to talk to you about the shooting or whatever. Now, can we talk about other things and get you to healing? Of course. Can you do it on your own? It's harder to do on your own. In a very similar way that personal training. Anybody here ever hired a personal trainer?
Absolutely. Of course.
A therapist needs to make you uncomfortable. And it's hard for you to make yourself that uncomfortable in the same way that a personal trainer makes you uncomfortable.
That's right.
And more uncomfortable than you would. Like, can you be effective if you go to the gym on your own? Sure. But a personal trainer is going to push you a little bit further than you would have pushed yourself on that day. And you'll have to be a bit more uncomfortable to deal with the things a personal trainer asks you to do.
You'll get mad at your personal trainer.
Facts.
Yeah.
You should be angry at your therapist at the time. I can't believe you asked me that. I can't believe you said that. I can't believe I'm in this space. And you wouldn't have gone there on your own. So can you work on your own? Of course. But there's something about the uncomfortable nature that a therapist can produce by asking the kind of questions that way. And, well, solution-focused brief therapy is a very question-oriented way of doing things. And it's hard to be that uncomfortable if you're just doing it on your own.
But to Envy's point, if there are people who have gone through traumatic situations but have coped with it on their own or have worked through it on their own. Some people may have their own individual faith. Some people, you know, whatever, read, studied, researched, whatever. But then may encounter people that say, you got to have therapy. Do they have to have therapy?
No, that's what I said. I'm not one of those people who thinks everybody needs a therapist. I really don't. But I think all of us have been through something we need to work through. That's just life.
And a lot of times, I think a lot of people know what they're supposed to do.
Yes.
But necessarily don't want to do that.
Correct.
And, you know, does that mean that they need therapy? Because they know what they're supposed to do, but they don't necessarily want to.
Do we though? Well, but hold on. Well, but to Envy's point, Let me think of an example, Envy.
I'll give you a perfect example. I'm a vengeful motherfucker. Hands down, straight up. There's people that have done things to me that I need my clap back. I need my revenge. That's
I love
just
that,
who I am.
actually. I'm the same way,
I'm
man.
the
I love
same
that.
way.
It's just who I am.
I'm petty enough that I can.
And if you mess with me, I'm cool. But if you mess with my family, I need that revenge. And I know I shouldn't feel like that. And I know Charlamagne would be like, oh, you need to heal because this, that, and the other. But that's good. And I understand that. I know that as a person.
Right.
But I need my lick back. And I'm not happy until I get that lick back when you mess with Gia, Madison, Logan, London, Brooklyn, Jackson, and Peyton. I need my lick back for that.
I think he was like that before all of them came in the picture, bro.
But
A lot of them knew.
Let me use.
I've known you for a while.
And you talked me off the ledge a couple of times, but
Yeah.
sometimes when it comes to them, I know what I'm supposed to do,
And is there
I
some-
know what a therapist is going to tell me to
Wait,
do.
but is
or-
there anything wrong with that though?
So I'm
Because
gonna tell you.
I don't personally see anything wrong with that.
I'm gonna tell you. I'm gonna give you my therapist answer. I'm gonna put on my therapist hat answer.
Go.
No, there is nothing wrong with being vengeful, petty, getting my lick back, clack back. I'm that way too.
That is
actually,
Rashawn. That is me.
in
That's your
some
shadow
ways.
side too, though, right?
Yeah, but there's nothing wrong with that inherently as a trait. Here's where we might need therapy. Like if you just came to me for therapy, like, hey, I do these things. Does it cause your life any particular harm?
No.
Then why would you change it, right? But oftentimes there's a secondary consequence that we pay for our choices, and we need to not have that secondary consequence. For example, every time I do that, I get sued and it costs me tens of thousands of dollars.
Correct.
Or if every time I do that, my wife gets confronted when she's in the grocery store. Now you have to make changes because other people are being impacted by your choices.
That I don't search for it. Like it's not on my mind every day. But if it comes around, I remember, and I make sure it's
But
going to
let me
happen.
give
Isn't that
you
a trigger?
Let me give you an example. Like, I don't know your wife, but let's say your wife is anxious. I got a very close friend. His wife is super anxious. So let's say you had an altercation with somebody. You're like, I need to get this person back. They have threatened the people you just listed.
Correct.
Like, I got to get this person back. If you were to do that, if you were married to my friend's wife, she'd be so anxious she wouldn't sleep for a month because she'd be so afraid that they're going to attack back. And at that point, you have to protect her from you at that moment because she's not sleeping because you've done something that is now making her available to anxiety.
Okay.
And now I would say, Envy, like, is it a problem being vengeful? No. But you decided to marry this person who's paying a consequence because you sought revenge. And now it's something that has to be solved. Inherently, does it have to be solved? Like, you're an unevolved human because you seek out vengeance?
I
No,
understand
I
that.
don't believe that at all.
I understand it, but also, like, let's say, Elliot, let's say you said something about my family or whatever it may be. Let's let it go, right? I'm not. I know what it is, and I know I'm gonna run into you. I know we're gonna see something, and not physically, right? But then I see online that your house is about to go in foreclosure.
Okay.
This really happened, by the way.
Okay,
This
okay.
isn't
I'm
hypothetical.
gonna try to buy that house.
This isn't hypothetical.
I'm gonna bulldoze it, and then I'm gonna give it to the Goodwill.
This really happened.
Hands down,
This isn't
absolutely.
hypothetical.
That's the time I'm on. I wasn't looking for it, but if it lands in my
He was
plate,
looking for it. He was looking at the list.
if it lands,
He was
How
looking
else
for
did he
it.
if
find
it
the
lands
exactly.
in my
He was
lap,
looking for it.
I am going to buy it. I am going to bulldoze it, put your name on the bulldozer, and then give it to the Goodwill.
That
So
sounds like you need
I get-
therapy, bro.
I get my revenge, and
care
then I
what you
donate
say.
to charity.
I love it. Nobody got hurt.
Jason Lee.
Nobody got hurt.
But Envy, I actually have zero.
His name is Envy. I envy that level of pettiness.
I actually have no problem with that, and I envy that level of pettiness. However,
I wasn't looking for it. It just fell in my lap.
However, if you were, now again, I don't know anything about your wife, but if you were married to a wife that knows you did that, she's like, now they're gonna they're gonna bulldoze our. Now you've stressed her out, and you have to think about your choices in the way. And now you might be married to somebody else that's, I'm gonna help you drive the bulldozer, and now so I don't
Right.
think inherently because of the trait you need therapy. It's the life that you've created, and do you have people in that life that are suffering because you're doing these things? Alcohol is a great example of what we're talking about, Envy, because oftentimes the person who is drinking is not the person paying the price for the drinking.
That's facts.
So people come into my office and they often say things like, I don't know why everybody tripping. They just told me, my wife told me if I don't come here, she's going to move out with the kids. Well, they don't think they have a problem, but someone else is paying the price.
Correct.
So is drinking inherently, if you were living in a cave by yourself, no, it doesn't really have an impact. It has an impact on you, and if you're willing to tolerate that impact, great. But if you are married to a woman and she's tired of seeing you passed out on the bathroom floor. Now with alcohol, you didn't see you passed out on the bathroom floor. So you're not paying the price for the consequence for your choices. the other people around you are. And most of the time when people come to my office with an addiction, they're not there because like I'm at rock bottom. Like we say this thing like people hit rock bottom. Rock bottom is a secondary person saying, if you don't change, I'm going to leave. So if you had my homie's wife, she would say to you, hey, we got 6 kids, stop doing this. Because every time you do it, it stresses me out. And I'm not the mom and wife I want to be when I'm super stressed out. And you'd come to therapy and be, my wife told me she was going to leave if I don't stop doing this petty stuff. And I just found this thing on for it, and I got to resist. And then, yes, you need therapy in that moment because you don't want the secondary consequence.
But there's oftentimes I will text Charlamagne or call him to try to agitate him about something he should be agitated about. But every day when he's going through something, he wants to send healing energy. And I don't know if he got that from you or therapy or this book or whatever.
He's changed a lot.
No, he's changed a lot. But I do feel like there should be times that you should give yourself permission to be petty. Because you do teach people how to treat you. You know, the people like, you either like me or you don't like me. The people that like me is because we have a mutual respect or whatever. The people that don't like me, they have a different experience. Isn't it okay to be in therapy, send people healing grace, but then also, clap back or react in a way that somebody may need to be reacted to in order to learn how to treat other people better?
No. Let me tell you why, Jason. Let me tell you why. I can't tell Envy to stop being petty because there's nothing inherently wrong with that trait. On the flip side, I can't tell Charlamagne to start being petty because there's nothing inherently virtuous about that trait. He has decided, like I have decided, I want to be a vessel of love. And there's a place you can push me that you're going to get crazy smoke. But most days, people do things to me. Like I'm a black man who's a leading figure in psychotherapy. Y'all wouldn't believe the stuff white people say and do to me in this field.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to provoke me. They're going to have to deal with seeing me smiling on social media, on television, on the breakfast. They just have to deal with watching. And that's my get back, is you have to just watch. We couldn't stop that dude. And I can't say, yes, you should be petty, because that's not inherently virtuous in the same way that's not inherently flawed. It's just a trait. It's just a blanket trait. There's nothing wrong with the two of you because you would bulldoze houses. And there's nothing wrong with him or I because I just want you to watch me win. That is my get back. And I know y'all watching. I know they watching.
Am I wrong for enjoying watching them bulldoze the house? Even though I'm like, don't do it, guys. Don't do it.
No. No.
But if you do it, let me see.
And I'm going to post it on Hollywood Unlocked, too.
No. Because as much as I told you the type of person, I follow Hollywood Unlocked, and I like that Jason shares things like, well, what's this? Right? Like, the world is a bit more entertaining with the DJ Envies and the Jason Lees in it. But that doesn't make it virtuous. It doesn't mean that it's something that everybody should do. I mean, I think all of us have to experience the breadth of human emotions, and we should all have an avenue with which to let out our anger, frustration, and those things. But it doesn't have to be bulldozing house. Envy.
I'm over that. It's not me anymore.
By the way, you brought up something really good, Elliot. Because we always have these conversations about culturally competent therapists. And one of the reasons I like talking to you is because I don't have to explain a Twitter beef. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I don't have to explain what somebody said about me on a blog or you see it, you know it already. Like, other therapists I've had, you've had to explain that to them. That takes a lot of time out of a session.
Yeah. But that goes back to representation. I hope all of you guys take that very, very, especially you. Like, there are people watching you that you're never going to meet, never going to see. And 20 years from now, they're still alive. Like, forget, they may be walking in your footsteps and have their own media company, but they're still alive because representation matters. And there's a frustration. I was talking to somebody about this weekend. There's a frustration associated with being black because we have to explain things to people. And I was talking with somebody the other day, and I was furious. I'm tired of explaining this, but I was talking to this person about racial trauma. And this is a clinician. This is a professional clinician at a professional clinician event. And somebody gave a lecture about racial trauma, and this person came up to me and said, "What'd you think of the lecture?" I said, I thought it was good. That person explained a lot of things that y'all need to hear. And she said, well, and this is a good-hearted, kind, thinks I'm getting it kind of a woman. And she said, well, I liked it too, but I was really frustrated because he said that black people and particularly men, experience trauma every day. That can't be true. I said, it's absolutely true.
Damn.
I don't know a black person, particularly black men, that don't experience trauma every day. And she said, how could that be? I said, let me explain it to you. If I locked you in your bedroom and I took the most venomous snake and I threw it in the bedroom with you and I locked that door and I close it and I don't let you in for a week, I don't let you out for a week, you didn't just experience trauma on the day you got bit. You experienced trauma every second of every day because you knew there was a venomous snake around. And she was like, oh, I get it now. Well, I'm tired of explaining that to y'all.
That's right.
Like, this is a funny thing. Like, I'm, again, black dude in this field, and I do lectures all the time. I do lectures online. You know, COVID happened, and I have to do these lectures, thousands of people to these lectures. I don't leave my house on mornings when I'm doing my lectures. And I told a colleague, a white colleague of mine, that she said, why not? I said, because I'm afraid if I leave my house, I will have an interaction with a police officer that will make me miss the thing I had to do in my house. Not that I did anything wrong, but I'm afraid I'm gonna have a broken tail light.
Right.
Like, I live in Texas.
Right.
I'm afraid I'm gonna get pulled over and harassed and won't be able to be there for my lecture. So when I have lectures sitting in my home office in Zoom, I don't leave my house. And he went, man, I don't have to think about that, because I live in a world where there's rattlesnakes everywhere.
Right.
So we experience trauma every day just knowing that there are snakes around. And I get tired of telling people, it's not just when the snake bite, it's not just when George Floyd gets bitten. We are scared because we know it's happening. We know that the snakes are there. So the bite is possible. And I think you're 100% right. Like, I don't want to explain blackness 24 hours of my day. I don't want to explain to everybody what we mean. There's a context for living this life that you and I just get, that you and I just get, that you and I just get. And I think we need more black therapists. Somebody said to me, why do I think black people, in particular men, don't go to therapy? And they said, it's because black men does and such. I said, don't do that. Don't say we don't go to therapy for some sort of flaw on us. We don't go to therapy for two very basic reasons. Number one, therapy was not built for us. Number two, it is not currently being done by us. So we need more therapists doing this so that we fit into it. There's a whole field of family therapy called, it's called brief therapy. Like, my book is Solution Focused Brief Therapy. There's a whole field called brief therapy. Brief therapy was developed in a place called Palo Alto, California. Y'all ever been to Palo Alto, California? It's the richest place I've ever. People buy mansions, tear them down to build better mansions. I mean, Palo Alto, California is affluent beyond belief. And the way they built brief therapy was they researched their therapy techniques on people in Palo Alto, California. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to realize a family on the west side of Chicago functions very differently than a family in Palo Alto, California.
Well, East Palo Alto's hood.
Okay.
They were shooting police back in the 90s in East Palo Alto.
I saw Palo Alto, and I was like, man, this is crazy.
So let me
Have
ask you a
you,
question. Will. I was going to say, I know you've been here, over an hour, and I want people
I'm
to go
good.
pick up the book.
I'm good.
But I wanted to just ask one question. A lot of people go to therapists, and the first time they go, they don't have a favorable time, and they feel like
There's actually
because
research
of,
about that.
yeah,
Research
and they
about
feel like because of that, they don't want to go back. And I want to talk about that, and I also want to discuss people being honest in therapy. I remember the first time I went to therapy, right? I went with my wife when we first got married. Went to a therapist. I mean, the church requires you to do it. Me and my wife wanted to do it, and it couldn't have been good because I was lying. I wasn't being honest and truthful with myself, so it couldn't have done anything for us but create more lies. So I just want to talk about that. People who are looking for therapists, because sometimes you find the wrong person, it's not the right fit, and people are scared to to go back.
Right. I mean, I tell people all the time, like, you don't go to, a restaurant and have a bad experience and then just boycott food, right? You don't do that.
Right.
You find another restaurant.
Right.
And I think we need to recognize therapy is the same. If I go to see a therapist and it doesn't work, it doesn't mean therapy didn't work. It just means that particular therapist didn't work. And we need to be just as variant in our attempts to find a good therapist as we are in our attempts to find good food. It's the same thing.
Well, I'll tell you, the reason I hired you as a therapist for me is I took him to a gay club.
Is that your test?
No, I didn't know he was the therapist. He just got in the car with us, and when he got in the car, where I tell you we were going?
We got in the car, and call that a car is not actually accurate.
car.
You know, Jason wasn't a car.
It was a Sprinter.
Yeah. But he turns to Tiffany. He doesn't even look at me. Turns to Tiffany, goes, "You telling me taking him to hell?" And I said, what? Nobody says anything to me.
So my introduction to my therapist was him seeing me drunk at the gay club. So he already knew my issues walking in the door. But what I do love about having a black therapist is there are days we have a session and you know I'm mentally wore out. Like I just can't even talk today. And he'll be like, okay, well, let's talk tomorrow or let's talk another day. I don't feel pressured to talk when I don't have the ability to talk, one. And two, I think what you just brought up is another thing. I don't want nobody to know my business because I'm in the business of making everybody's business my business. So to be able to talk to somebody where I can say, here's everything, this is the shit I've been hiding, and him go, well, that's not as bad, and let's break it down or whatever. You know, I think that's been helpful. And I do think, you know, to Charlamagne's credit, being able to tell somebody like me who has a responsibility talking to millions of people, like, you should talk to somebody to work through your shit so that way when you're talking, you know, not that you said this, but this is what I took from it, you have you've worked on your own stuff so it doesn't influence how you talk to other people or talk about other things. And so I think, you know, having a therapist of color, somebody that can understand me as a black man, understand what I'm going through, and allow me the safe space to be honest is important because, you know, we're judged every day. Every time we walk out the door, we're judged, but to not have that in a session is important.
Do therapists go to therapy?
Some of them do. But there,
You got one.
I want to come back to the lie thing, and then I'll address that. You've known Charlamagne for how long?
Too long. 13 years up close and personal, but I knew him before that.
Okay. In a relationship of that length, there's got to be a trust between the two of y'all. Like you would tell him things now that A, you wouldn't have told him 13 years ago, and B, you wouldn't tell other people. Like there are things that you would say to him that you wouldn't say to me. You just met me.
Because I mean, there's certain things that I know only Envy can understand.
Correct.
Because of what we do. You know what I mean?
Correct. So I say that as an example to say the client's honesty is actually the therapist's responsibility because once you feel trusted, you can't help but tell the truth.
Correct.
So if you are lying, that means you're hiding something, which means I am not performing in a way that conveys trust. So your honesty is actually my responsibility. Your honesty means I haven't given you enough trust and safety because once you feel those things, it is literally impossible to lie. Like we don't do it when we feel trust and safety. So my job is to make sure you're in an environment where you feel trusted and safe.
Gotcha.
I wanted to ask too, like, you know, we've seen so many people discussing mental health nowadays. Number one, do you think it has been a rise of black people going to therapy? And what do you think folks still get wrong about mental health?
So to answer the first question, yeah, I think we do have more black people going to therapy. It's the Tiger Woods effect, right? Like we're all old enough to remember when Tiger Woods took over golf, black people started going to play golf. And they weren't playing golf before that. Serena Williams and Venus Williams, similar thing. Like young black girls go to tennis courts to play tennis because representation matters. So the fact that you guys, probably more than any other platform in the world, platforms talk about black mental health, more black people are going to therapy because they heard Charlamagne suggested so, and like they heard it. So now they're like, man, maybe I can go do this. And it's the exact same thing that happened in tennis. It's the exact same thing that happens in golf. And what I think we get wrong more than anything else is we think the therapist is supposed to solve our problems. And that's actually not true. Like life is a turbulent flight. The therapist is supposed to make you a better pilot. And you're going to have turbulence, period. None of us are going to have a less than turbulent flight. You have different turbulences and sometimes longer flights. But my job is to make you a better pilot, not to remove your turbulence.
You always say, this will be my last question, you always say you want to break people's brains.
Yeah.
You tell me this and I see you say it on something. Why do you want to break somebody's brain? Like, what does that mean? Because I want to break your limitations. I want to break your thoughts. Like, because we're told so much stuff that like logically makes sense, so we buy it, but it's actually inherently not true. Like sometimes things that are logical aren't actually true. And it's like, you know, I'm always going to have anxiety. Well, who told you that? That's not necessarily true. Or we have this thing like, however long it took you to create a problem, that's how long it's going to take you to remove a problem. That's not true. I mean, you asked me how, when I was growing up in my environment, how did I know? And my mother made me curious, and she made me curious in an instant. I was crying one time. It's a really long story that I won't take up now, but I will tell you part of it. I will tell you part of it. I was super duper depressed. I was about 10. And we were at church and we were going to take a field trip. Like the church in Boston was going to come to New York and the church in New York was going to go to Boston. And we're riding on this church and
and it's before, navigation systems and cell phones and all that. And we heard an explosion coming from underneath the bus, and it was the axle breaking. So the bus driver gets off and he's like, we can't repair this. We got to wait for another bus to come. By the time the other bus came, it was too late. So they just took us back to Boston. Now I'm 10 years old and I'm so confused. I turned to my mother and I said, Mom, like, why wasn't our church protected? And my mother said, what do you mean? I said, well, if there's any vehicle on the road that should have been protected, wouldn't it be a vehicle full of church people going to do a church people thing? And my mother, I think my mother's wisdom caused her to understand what I was really asking was, why do bad things happen to good people? And my mother I'll never forget it, she put her hand on my leg and she said, sometimes God gives you trials to prepare you for something he needs you to do later in life, so you have a story. And this is just our trial. And at 10, 11, whatever age I was, I remember thinking vividly, I wonder what I'm being prepared for. And it helped me deal with the suicidal thoughts and depression that was to come, because I wanted to figure out, what was I being prepared for? Now, I genuinely believe I was being prepared to be a therapist, write these books, travel the world and give lectures. I've been over 30 countries teaching people how to practice solution-focused brief therapy and sharing as much love and wellness and happiness as I possibly can. But I had to know what pain felt like in order to value this. This is exactly why most comedians have had a difficult life. It taught them the power of laughter. So thus they learned how to make people laugh. I had a difficult story and it taught me the power of hope and happiness, and I want to spread that. But it was in that moment, and one of our biggest flawed thoughts is it takes a long time to solve a problem. That's not true. My mother, she didn't fix my depression, because I told you, life is turbulent. That's just life. But my mother made me a better pilot by giving me curiosity. So now, every difficult thing I went through, no matter how depressed I got, no matter how suicidal I got, I wanted badly to live through it so I could see what I was being prepared for. And if I enjoyed it, then life would become so much more livable. And when I was about 20, I realized, I think I'm supposed to be a therapist. I changed my major in psychology. I don't think I've had a bad day since, to be honest. Now, that's not to say I haven't had bad things happen. Right. But I just have a new perspective on life that's just changed everything.
Another word, brief, is jumping off the book to me. Some people may interpret brief as like 3 weeks. What's the brief?
Brief, that's funny. So the group I told you about in Palo Alto, California, when psychotherapy was created, the psychotherapy and psychoanalysis were synonymous. Like Charlamagne talked about his dad going to therapy for 2 to 3 times a week. Psychoanalysis is 2 to 3 sessions a week for 3 to 5 years. Brief means not that. That's what, when they wrote about it in the 1950s, they were just describing brief meant shorter than 2 to 3 sessions a week for 3 to 5 years.
I just got one last question. I know we're wrapping up. Charlamagne always talks about being anxious, and people always talk about anxiety. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't look at anxiety as a bad thing. It's how you control it, right? I have 6 kids. Charlamagne has 4. When they go out, even to this day, when I go out as a grown-ass man, my mom and dad still have anxiety about me going out because they're scared, right? Yes, but they're not scared to a point where they're, listening.
Something could happen.
Right. But it's not to the point where they're calling me at 6 in the morning. Oh yeah, are you done? But they're anxious. Same thing with my kids. I'm anxious no matter what. When my daughter goes out, she goes to college in the city, NYU. I'm anxious when she goes out.
Right.
That's never going to change.
No, that's healthy anxious, though.
Okay.
Like anxiety is like everything else. There's a degree of healthiness to it, and then some people go way beyond the spectrum. To where, and think about it in this term, when something is interrupting your ability to live a normal daily life, that's when it becomes a problem. So that anxiety, like my daughter's at NYU, she just called me, told me she's going to a party. I'm gonna have a hard time relaxing tonight because something could happen. Like that's normal. But if you have anxiety where like my daughter's at NYU and I can't eat, I can't sleep, correct, like that's the problem. And I think we have to learn how to manage that and learn how to manage it.
Because when people hear anxiety, they automatically think negative, right? Correct. They always think bad.
No, but there is healthy anxiety. Like you love that daughter, or all your children, that daughter specifically because we're talking to her. I think I love them all, yeah. But you don't want anything bad to happen to her. So when she tells you, I've done this thing that puts me at risk, even mild risk, right? It goes back to my rattlesnake example. As a black man, there are rattlesnakes out there. So my daughter just told me she's walking into the world of rattlesnakes. I'm going to be worried about that. And that's normal. That is inherently normal.
I call it parental paranoia.
Right, and I think that's a healthy thing.
Mm-hmm.
However, anxiety sometimes interrupts our ability to live a daily life. And there's a really simple way, not simple. Well, it's simple in that it doesn't require a lot of steps, but it's hard. Is one of the things is we have to learn as a society to think more positively. We have to learn as a society to think about our strengths and our resources, because when you think about yourself as wonderful, when you think about yourself as amazing, and when you look back in your history at all of the things you've overcome, you have no choice but to relax. But we tend to not do that. Like Jason, to me, is a superhero. Like he's overcome so much stuff, like so much stuff. He shouldn't be anxious ever. All he has to do is look in the rearview mirror and see all of the things he's overcome, which will give him confidence that I can overcome the next thing. Like every human being is undefeated against their most difficult challenges. Now you might be scarred, battled, and bruised, but you got through them.
All right.
Every single human being. And no matter what the next challenge is, if before you face it, you just remember, wait a minute, I've overcome every single challenge thrown my way, your resilience goes up and your anxiety goes down. We just don't naturally think that way. We think of all the other times that we failed and all the times that we misstepped and all the times and now I'm afraid of the next challenge. But I don't want anybody to think like that. I want everybody to remember, like, you got through every challenge. My mother's like, I could not imagine this woman anxious. And I remember one time, I was in college, I had no money. I literally have no idea how I'm going to pay for books. And I got this job at this drugstore, and I got fired from the job. Stupid reason. It wasn't my fault. I won't get into it, but it wasn't my fault. But I got fired. And I came home, and I'm freaking out. Like, I got fired from this job. How am I going to buy my books? How am I going to pay tuition? How am I going to go to college? My mother looked me dead in the face, and she said, you were looking when you found this one. And she turned around and walked away. And that was my mother's way of saying, like, look in your history. You've had this problem before and solved it. So why would you fear it now? And I would say the same thing to everybody. Like, every human being has a rich history of past success. So why do we waste time fearing the next challenge? You're very good at accomplishing challenges. You just don't give yourself that credit. And the moment you do, your anxiety goes down and your resilience goes up. Just like that.
Let's end on what you told me a while ago about anxiety and faith.
You can't have both. Like, if you believe that God's got you, that means the only things that will happen are things that God intended for you to experience. And so you can't have faith and anxiety, because anxiety is fear-based. So if I believe very strongly like God's got me, that means if I'm going through something hard, I'm going through that hard thing for a reason. So there's no reason I just have to trust everything. And that's what I would say. I would end by saying, like, if you can figure out a way to trust every experience, you're going through all of these things for a reason, and be grateful for everything, like everything, you are untouchable emotionally. Like, you are just an indestructible force when you're just grateful for everything, not just grateful for the good things, not just grateful for the profound things, but I mean, like, grateful for all of it. Life is different.
What if I can only get there through medication?
Oh, you can get there through conversation. Conversation is far more powerful than medication.
Okay.
Promise.
What if I can only get there by being petty?
As we've already established, pettiness is okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, Elliott Connie,
man,
thank
make
you
sure
so
you
much.
go
The
get
new book, The Solution Focused Brief Therapy.
That's right. And he's got
Diamond,
4
get
books,
it.
man. The Art of Solution Focused Therapy, Solution Building and Couples Therapy, the Solution Focused Marriage, and Solution Focused Brief Therapy.
Can I say something about
Yes.
the new book? There's something I want to say about the new book. The book is called The Solution Focused Brief Therapy Diamond, and a lot of people out there, like, if you're a clinician, get the book. It's going to teach you how to do solution focused brief therapy like no other book will do. But what is more important to me, if you're not a clinician and therapy is hard, like, my colleague and I wrote this book so you could get therapy from this book.
Adam Froer.
Dr. Adam Froer. So if you're out there and you're thinking, like, I want therapy, but how am I going to get kids coverage, and how am I going to get to whatever? Like, you can have your life changed through conversation. Sometimes that conversation is through a book. So this book isn't just for professionals. It's for people who want to be inspired. And an inspired person can do anything. And if you're not a clinician, the book sounds clinical, but I promise you, if you read this book, you'll be inspired to change your life.
All right. Well, Elliott Connie, ladies and gentlemen, we
Tell me to
appreciate you
find
for
you too,
joining us,
man.
man. Yeah, how can they find you?
You can find me on social media at Elliott Speaks on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, Elliot spelled 2 L's, 2 T's. And you can go to my website, ElliotConnie.com, and that's where you can find all my stuff.
All right. Well, it's the Breakfast Club. Elliot Connie, ladies and gentlemen.
Wake that ass up.
Early in the morning.
The Breakfast Club.